Hey everybody, we're here.
Are we live?
We are live.
We are live. Okay. Because I'm looking and I'm not seeing that we're live. Because I'm on YouTube. Are we
No,
live?
I see it. I see it. I think we're there.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay. Well, I don't see the chat. I don't see anything. Do we
Oh,
got a chat
it's
going on?
yeah, no, it's only in the yeah, let's see what's going on. Oh yeah, I see there's a bunch of people in the chat there.
Okay.
Maybe let
All
us
right.
know, guys. If you're in the
Oh, there
chat
we
and it's
go.
working,
There we
let
go.
us know.
There we go. There we go. We're live. Pow. Okay.
Bang.
Welcome in to the second ever Zion Media live stream. And I better turn this down because I can hear myself talking. Trevor's going to jump back on. He was running a little bit behind, but I am joined here with David the Lion Douglas and Lance Weaver. Trevor, like I said, the Key Keys is going to jump back on here shortly. And I don't know, I can't see the chat. I can see it on my phone, so I guess I'll have to see it twice. I am currently in North Carolina. I've got some real estate. I've got a business out here in North Carolina, so I kind of bounce back and forth between Utah, North Carolina right now. So I am sitting in one of my rental homes right now doing this live stream. We wanted to have Lance on, but before we get to Lance, I want to let everybody know what's happening at Zion Media. We recently completed our 100th episode the other day, and I'm not going to tell you who the guest is. This is a very well-known, prominent figure in the LDS community, and we had him on our show. That episode will drop tomorrow night. David, 6 o'clock. I know you got the temple tomorrow, but can you make the 6 o'clock?
Absolutely. It's
Okay.
definitely happening.
That's our time slot. And for those of you who know, and I know we got Bingo and Janelle and HR and who else do we got? Hank will jump on, Quentin. And we have all these people that show up on the chat, and we're creating this really cool community, and it's really pretty fun. And so 6 p.m. that's our time slot. Make sure you tune in. Tell your friends, tune in tomorrow. We're not going to tell you who the guest is. We're going to keep that a secret for tomorrow. But I'll tell you what, this guest shares some things that he's never shared before publicly. He talks a little bit about an addiction that he had for 10 years. He talks about being sexually abused as a teenager. He's never shared that before, but he talks about it on our show. And then we also drop something that is huge. And we are the first show to drop, I'll give you a hint, his music video. And this guy has music videos that have done over 100 million on YouTube. So you can start. I can tell Lance. He's like, I know who it is. He's starting to piece it together. But really cool interview. Tune in. It was one of the more fun interviews I've done. He's very animated, great guy. And so make sure you tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. Now, Lance, you have been featured on Zion Media multiple times. And I think it's important that I kind of give some context to everybody as to how you and I met in the first place. So, and Lance knows this because I talked to him privately. But when I had this a revelatory experience, we'll call it, in prison, while I was reading the Book of Mormon and the New Testament, the Old Testament for that matter. And there was a phrase in the Book of Mormon that says, to go no more out. And that phrase really opens some things up for me. Some people will call them multiple mortal probations. The Hindus call it reincarnation. Or the doctrine of eternal lives would probably be a better terminology for all of that. But when I got out of prison, one of the first things I Googled when I got my brand new iPhone was to go no more out LDS. And oh, hey, Trevor, there's Trevor the Key Keys. He's just jumped in here. The live stream's popping off. We're at 29 people right now. Hopefully this grows as we talk. But I Googled to go no more out LDS, and what came up was an essay. And I didn't know who wrote it. it was this gatheredin.one website, very obscure website. And I read this piece, and I didn't know it was Lance that put it together, but I read this piece and I was like, wow, whoever wrote this is dialed in. And I went to the Lord and said, hey, should I reach out to this guy that wrote this? And the answer was not yet. So I'm like, okay. So that was in 2020. Fast forward to November 2023. That's when I was told, now's the time. Reach out to Lance Weaver. Lance, I don't know if I sent you an email or how we actually connected. But I remember our first discussion lasted like 3 hours, and we talked about a ton of things. And then it was shortly thereafter that Lance and I met in person. He came up to my office in Davis County, and we sat down. And this was before we had a channel, we had Zion Media. But I knew for sure after talking to Lance that once we kicked this off, people needed to hear what Lance had to say. I believe Lance has really tuned into some things, whether it's Book of Mormon geography to Go No More Out, new revelations, and maybe even people that might be in Jerusalem that we're not aware of that are prophetic. And we've talked a lot about those on our podcast. So Lance, welcome to the live stream, man. I know people have a ton of questions for you. David, I don't know if you can see the chat. If you wouldn't mind managing the chat. And listen, let's get the super chats rolling in for the Douglas family. I would also like everybody to know and really thank everybody. I was looking at how much our YouTube channel has made in 100 days. We've been around for about 100 days, and it's $4,700. Our YouTube channel has made $4,700 in 100 days. And just so you guys know, all that money goes to David. He does all of our editing. It goes to his family. And our goal is to turn this into a full-time job for the Douglas family. And so thank you guys for all your support. And just know that all the contributions, all the super chats, all the revenue that we generate from the channel goes to David Douglas and his family. So thank you for supporting the channel and supporting the Douglas family.
Someone randomly gave us $100 super chat earlier this week, just out of the blue.
Insane. Thank
That's
you.
so awesome. Super awesome.
Okay. Well, let's get the discussion rolling. There's one question that I want to start off with that you had mentioned on our private chat that we have, Lance, about people thinking that you're, bagging on the Heartland model. Let's just set the record straight for exactly where you stand on the Heartland and Meso model.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people saw the title of that video and they're thinking like, oh, he's just a Meso guy, because we were kind of almost seemed like we were picking on the Heartland theory. But like I said in some of the other videos that we've gone through, we're open to all models, but I am very convinced of my own model, right? I've had some crazy experiences. That doesn't mean anything to anyone else, only to me. So I just have to try and convince everybody. And I think that people will see once they go through the hundreds of hours that my model, which incorporates both other models, right? It encompasses the Heartland and the Mesoamerican models. Really, all the good stuff from both those models are incorporated into my model, as well as a lot more, right? The whole key of my model is that the most populated ruins on the entire continent are the main cities mentioned.
Hey, Lance, I'm going to cut you off because I see comments all the time being like, how come Lance doesn't look at the computer? Where is he looking at?
I have like two big old screens, and I'm always like putting my one that I'm looking at or over here. Anyway, I'm kind of trying to switch between the two. I'll try and look kind of at the screen, but whoa, Shane, you're muted, man.
I'm muted.
Yeah, well, something's going on. I don't know.
Okay, so Lance, let's touch on a couple of things. And listen, if you guys have a question for Lance, post in the chat. We'll answer the question. If you want your question to be answered first, give us a super chat, and we'll make sure that those get answered right away.
I just saw a really good question pop up.
Okay, let's go.
Really good, right here. How do temple family sealings work with reincarnation? Really good question.
Okay, so my opinion, and like I say, I mean, the reincarnation stuff, if you watch the video, we go through a lot of different ideas because we're talking about the multiverse, right? We're talking about like different dimensions essentially, and different
And
timelines.
all opinions, by the way.
Right. And in my article, it's like pretty exhaustive that it's like something that's so complicated that we can't really understand. But the one thing that I feel pretty certain about, and I mean, but that's not very certain when it comes to this topic, is that like people who go to hell, and people who are sons of perdition, even, if you go and read what in DNC 76, like what those people do, they go to hellfire. You know, they go and dwell with the angel in eternity. It's like, well, what is that? Like, this is hell. Like, just go to the temple. Who is the God of this world? Who rules this world? Like, it's the devil. This is hell. We're here, guys.
Welcome
And
to
for
hell.
people who,
Yes.
yeah, exactly. For people who have like come down, and this is really explained pretty well in OASP and a lot of different texts. It's like you have these higher group beings, and they volunteer, just like Adam and Eve do, to jump down, even though they've graduated, they've gone to higher levels, right? Higher dimensions, higher kingdoms.
Ascending to descend.
Exactly. You're right. Jacob's ladder type thing. And they descend and they come here, not necessarily because they deserved it, but because they're trying to help other people ascend, trying to just higher the vibration of the entire planet. Right. But they even have the possibility, like if they're not careful, they can get sucked into the vortex, you know, of this world and then just get spitting back and forth through the everlasting deaths, right? The resurrection of death, which is just reincarnated in that same crappy place over and over again. So in my opinion, like people who are exalted, if you make it to the celestial kingdom, right, then the sealing power actually works for you because you're not coming back here. You're going to heaven to go no more out, right? Does that make sense? You're done. So the sealings actually work. But for people who don't work, right, like they're going to go get a new family. They're just going to recycle.
So we have another question actually by Latter-day Chad, who is our first super chat for tonight.
Super chat, Latter-day Chad. Let's go.
Dude, I love Chad. Okay. We got to do a thing with Chad, me and him. I want to chat with him a bunch.
Latter-day super chat.
So his question is thoughts on the Wautern Interior Sea by Seaway.
He means the west,
Florida.
He means the Western Interior Seaway. Okay, so I had so many people hitting this up in the comments, and I just had to tell them all, like, we're going to hit this today, and we're going to have to do a whole show on it because I'm just going to try and spend less than 10 minutes on it in this super chat, and then if people want to have more questions about it, they can hit it up again. Okay, but listen, I mean, everybody who put a comment in there talking about how it's like the ocean used to come up through the Mississippi River before the time of Christ. I got to step you through this. Okay. So this is my whole life. I am a geologist. I know so much about geology. If you could spend 100 hours with me, I could talk for 100 hours straight and walk you through every single aspect of the geologic record and the debate between catastrophism and creationism through the whole record. So that's the debate that we're talking about here. If you want to try and make an argument, which, okay, remind me what is that guy's name? There's a guy, where is it? Let's see. Crud, and I just lost the window. Oh, there.
It's all right.
Okay. So everybody remind me the YouTube channel of the guy who did the video that he is referencing, where he like referenced the Interior Seaway.
Oh, wow. I know.
Come on, David.
Somebody put it in the comments.
This is your world, David. We're Book of Mormon geography. You should know this.
Come on, David. It was one of the last.
You're asking
okay. We're just gonna search that.
Wayne May?
It's
or
Key. No. He's not one of the main guys. He's just someone who has kind of like his own channel. He's got some cool stuff.
Anyways.
Stuff. No, I'm gonna find it really quick.
Michael P.
Just one second. Michael P.
Oh, are you talking about Michael P? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Latter-day Chad. Looks like Latter-day Chad knows what's going on. David, Ancient Answers can't answer that question.
I'm going to it right now.
We may need to swap out Ancient Answers with Latter-day Chad.
Maybe.
Okay. You don't have to.
I'm going to share my screen here in a second too. Give me 1 second. Let's get to where he's showing it.
By the way, shout out
Jonathan Neville. That's what Quentin's saying. Is that possibly it?
No. So Jonathan Neville and Rod
No.
Meldrum, right, are the main proponents of the Heartland. They're awesome, intelligent guys. Like Jonathan, he is sharp as a tack. Like holy good, such a great researcher. So I've talked to those guys at some of the last conferences. I hope to have a lot more conversations with them. They don't hit this. This is just this Michael P guy who's kind of like suggested this. Okay, so let me really quick. Can you go ahead and share my screen? There we go. Okay, so this is his video, right? And he makes kind of two propositions, right? Basically, he's making the theory that a lot of people do. That's like, well, at the time of Christ, we know that there was tons of catastrophe, a lot of huge destructions, and we imagine that the shorelines possibly were changed. We know at least that it talks about a couple cities being sunk, and then in 4th Nephi it follows that up and said that some cities could not be renewed, right, because the ocean had come up in the stead thereof. Like, so it's saying that not only were there like tsunamis or something that covered cities, some cities couldn't even be renewed because they were permanently sunk in the ocean. Right. So that's a big deal. We're talking about some kind of a localized eustatic sea level, which there's lots of ways we can explain that geologically. But I just want to give everybody a little bit of a geologic lesson so they understand what they're saying. Okay.
And for those of you who don't know, by trade, Lance is a geologist. So he understands what he's talking about when it comes to anything involving the earth and geology.
Yeah. Okay.
You can't get more credible than this. You can't
for
get
real.
more credible.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, I work for the Geological Survey. I definitely know my geology. My specialty is paleogeography and geological history. Right. I've dedicated my whole life to this, and I'm going to show you some things. I have all these tools to help people kind of understand. I'm just going to jump into them and help you get what I'm talking about. Okay. So first of all, you have to understand that. Can you see my screen here? This is my website, by the way. So if you go to utahgeology.com, I have a ton of geology resources. I have this app that I've built that helps people kind of visualize geology. But do you see this line right here? Can you see where my cursor is? Hopefully everyone can kind of follow that. So this is actually, like, every one of these different colors is a different geologic age. So when we make geologic maps as geologists, we label every different age with a different color so people can understand the progression of the different layers, right? So as an example, since everybody kind of knows about the Grand Canyon, we go to the Grand Canyon and you see there's all these different colors heading down, right? So if you click on, for instance, any one of these layers, in the side thing here, it's actually giving you a description of what exactly that is, right? We've got the Kaibab Formation, all their early Permian formations. We go down into the Pennsylvania and the Carboniferous, Pennsylvania and Permian, head all the way down into the Cambrian and the Precambrian, every single layer stacked on top of each other, things that I've studied my whole life. But those layers then have, like, the kind of law of superposition where you can kind of continually follow these things all the way across the United States. So we can track a layer, say like a Permian sandstone or limestone, all the way from the Grand Canyon into Oklahoma, right? I mean, the Chinle is a great example. The Chinle Formation is something you see in Zion. It's got 2 members, and it's this huge river system. And the river system flowed all the way, like, we can track that layer all the way into almost Louisiana, like definitely, the Oklahoma-Louisiana border. And we think that river was probably coming from the Appalachians. Like, I hope that makes sense, that you can follow geologic layers, okay? And so the second point that I want to hit is that by what the unit is, like, we can tell whether a unit is a shoreline. For instance, if it's a beach sand, we know exactly where the beach sand was. Okay, so these same layers that you see in the Grand Canyon, if you head on over to the Mississippi, like this pattern that you see right here, that is an ancient sea level. Okay, and as sea level dropped, it made different layers of different ages as it receded, because the Mississippi River is just chugging away, right? Ever since the, probably since the Ordovician, but definitely since the beginning of the Mesozoic, like, the Mississippi River has been there depositing all of this sediment in the Delta, and we can track those layers, right? And then we can date them. So we use absolute dating on any kind of volcanics. We can use detrital zircons to do uranium series dating. We can do argon-argon dating on certain kinds of volcanics. And then we use fossils that we correlate from those absolute dating methods to correlate those rocks across. Like, I can take you up into the mountains, into Cretaceous layers. And that's important. So remember what I'm saying, into Cretaceous layers, because he asked about the Cretaceous seaway, right? The interior Western seaway, which is a Cretaceous phenomenon. I can take you up in the mountains above my house, right? In Cedar Tech, I can go up Spanish Fork Canyon and show you the Cretaceous layers. Okay. So let me help you understand what you are saying. Okay. When you, so if you go to my paleo page, you can see what the West looked like, or what the United States looked like through different times. Let's go to the late Cretaceous. Do you see how there's a seaway right here in the middle of the United States? Can you see my cursor there?
We see
Yeah.
Utah.
It's
Yeah,
frozen
well, on
in
the
Utah.
bottom right corner.
On the right.
Bottom right corner.
Oh, gotcha.
The image.
On the right. So, and we're seeing the same thing in the center here. This is the remnants of this Cretaceous seaway. Okay. If you go through time, you're seeing this Cretaceous seaway. Now that seaway dissected the continent in half during the Cretaceous, right? So these are units that we can radiometric date because there are detrital zircons that we can get within them, you know, and there's other fossil correlations as well as other radiometric dating methods we can do from huge igneous intrusions that happened in the West during this period. So we can date this thing, and we know that it lasted from about like, I don't know, 170 million years ago, 140 million years ago to...
You're going to lose David on that one. You're going to lose.
Okay, now listen.
How high is that water line? How high is that water line, real quick?
I mean, that's kind of a weird question as far as how high it is. That's the shoreline right there that I'm showing you, right? Can you see the shoreline?
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering how deep is it? I mean, I hear about the Bonneville shoreline. I'm wondering, is it that high, or am I missing something here?
We can tell also how deep water systems are because when oxygen gets to the bottom of water, it actually oxidizes the soils. So we can tell from the oxidation state of the clays that are deposited offshore, whether there's like an anoxic environment or whether there's a lot of oxygen going in there. Okay?
Lance, you want to know one of your biggest problems right now you're facing, though?
What's that?
This right here. David thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old. Apparently, some of the other people in the chat do as well. So,
okay, hold on, everyone. Okay, because I started out thinking that as well, and I still hold space. Like I can talk to any creationist, and we can walk through, and I can tell you, look, these are the problems that you need to solve. Because it's possible. I'm not going to say that the Earth is not young. I think that 6,000 years is essentially impossible. But let's say that you want to say that there were creative periods and maybe it's just very young. But we're going to say that our radiometric dates that we have are polluted because the sun and anyway, there's different things that we can come up with to try and say that radiometric dating is not like whether it be any radiometric dating method we have is not exactly accurate, right? And I'll give that to you, even though you'd have to prove it. I could give it to you because I definitely believe that at one point too, right? I as I was going through school was trying to figure out this exact same problem. So I want to walk you through it. All of our creationist friends who are in the chat.
Maybe we should have Dean Sessions on a call with us.
We should do that. He's a universal model guy. 6,000 years.
Have you heard of him, Lance?
Great.
I had a 2-hour conversation with him at the last conference.
No way.
Okay.
Did you guys just go like this?
There's a lot, like, so I have a brother who is like a creationist, right? He definitely believes the Earth's 600 years old, but because he's had 20 years to go back and forth with me for me to kind of educate his theories, he doesn't hold to theories that are impossible, right? That are impossible given the evidence. But
Lance, is it more likely that we have a 6,000 year history, but the Earth is like this is a 6,000 year cycle that we're in right now, but there were many other cycles, whether it's the Atlanteans or the Anunnaki or whatever it is.
Lemuria.
Yeah,
Lemuria.
There's so many different ways that we could explain this, and I'll have to go through those in a different video, right? This is a 4-hour treatise, honestly, that I'm trying to just kind of give you the background to do your own homework on.
Oh, Craig Moore with a super chat for $10. Thank you, Craig Moore. And no question, but thank you.
Right. And I have like
just so you know, we do have a couple super chats that have backed up.
Yeah, but he's got to answer the question. You guys keep.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm just
all right. Just give me 6 more minutes to try and work my way through this. Okay.
6.
Sorry, maybe 10 minutes. God, I don't know how I can even cram it into such a small amount of time. Okay, listen, this is such a huge topic. There's lots of ways to explain how we can fit the Bible. I have a lot of amazing ideas. I just want to first help you understand that a geologist like myself, or if you talk to any other kind of credible geologist, we understand, like I have walked every single layer. I'm making videos on it right now. I have actually dozens of videos that I haven't posted yet on my Utah Geology site, where I go through every unit from the bottom of the Grand Canyon to the top of Bryce, right? The entire Grand Staircase. And people like Dean Sessions, right, who are kind of like armchair geologists is what I call them. They haven't really studied geology in any kind of meaningful way. They just kind of do it from their computer and come up with lots of theories that might sound cool to somebody who knows absolutely nothing about geology. And he has a lot to offer the world. He's a cool guy. I'm just saying as far as being a scientist with geology, I can walk you through why the reasons that most of what they propose, like for instance, saying that like half of the units that are in the Grand Canyon all happened in a biblical flood, right? And I was totally open to that when I was going through school. Like I said, and even now, you show me the evidence, hey, but I've already seen evidence that makes that impossible. And you know what the evidence is? If all those units are the biblical flood, you would not have footprints in every single layers. You know what I mean? You know when a package of sediment can be deposited catastrophically, right? Like we can see different like things that might have been huge tidal surges from hurricanes, especially within the Cretaceous layers and the sequence stratigraphy there. But when you have a layer that has footprints, has burrows next to the footprints, has every single aspect of a beach system that you would see on the current beach, right? You have like dinosaur footprints or some kind of reptile footprints with little burrows and a crustacean burrow next to that and little worms going next to that. That doesn't happen in the milieu of a huge flood. Does that make sense? Like you can see a layer that might have been deposited in a huge flood environment, like a tsunami, and it puts everything together, and you don't get uniformitarian principles in there. You don't get these perfect ripple marks next to a trackway that's walking across to it, next to burrow marks. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Right. And so if you want to try and find the flood in the fossil record, if you're, believing in that literality, then you need to find yourself some units that don't show any of those things. And I've searched for them, right? And they are few and far between. So you'd have to come and talk to me and have one of those 4-hour lessons and have me do one of those videos where I'll walk you through the evidence. I'll show them through one at a time until I convince you, like, look, this layer has a forest, like an absolute fossilized forest with the trees standing upright and little prints next to the fossilized trees. That's not the flood, right? And you can't have it both ways when you have, like, within each of those layers, when you have rhyolites, which are ash flowtops. You can't have a volcanic ash going on the bottom of the sea. It doesn't work that way, right? And yet every one of these units, we can correlate them across the nation and find places where there was volcanic ashes from volcanoes going off and falling from the air in this layer that creates a very distinctive, like a rhyolite that's very distinctive. You can't have that. You can't say this is the flood, and yet there's a volcanic ash, right, in there, a rhyolitic ash fall. It's okay. So let me go back to this. Just say I've done this to every single layer. So when you are trying to say to yourself, like, oh, look, this layer right here, this Cretaceous, let me just show you his thing, right? He goes here and he's showing all of these things from the Cretaceous. And I don't even know where he got these. I think maybe he edited these, because that is not true, right? This map is not true. The Cretaceous does not make its way through Nevada in that way, right? It comes straight through the middle here. More in these ones, you'll see here.
We need to do a whole video on how old is the Earth, like literally a whole video.
Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, I'm going crazy on this. Okay, but yeah, we'll jump away from that. But just I can't explain it in such a short amount of time. But please, everybody who believes in that, like, bear with me. I am your advocate. Like I've said before in other videos, I think there should be creationist and uniformitarianist. I think that is healthy to push the science forward, whether I believe in it or not. I will help you I will help educate your ideas. And I've done this already with Richard, who talked to me for a little while. That I'll walk you through it, but you've got to be open to the evidence, and we've got to walk through it, because there's so many things that I've seen that you have not seen that I have to show you. And once you've seen them, you'll be like, oh, well, I have to throw away that theory. I've already been through this process. But you'll be like, oh, okay, well, let's think of it a different way. Or maybe we can think of, maybe the flood was like a massive extinction event. So let's look at the huge extinction events and see if maybe that was it. And it didn't actually deposit a whole lot of things. It just like filled up a bathtub and emptied the bathtub and killed everything off. But it didn't actually deposit a lot of layers in there. Anyway.
So this kind of goes along with what's happening right now. So how did you get your start? This is from Dog Named Bingo, our boy. What's
Jordan,
up, Bingo?
Let's go.
How did you get your start into all of this, and how do you keep it all straight? Do you sleep at all at night?
Yeah, I mean, my wife would tell you, I can't talk geology or archaeology or Book of Mormon geography or anything to my wife. Because like, you can see if this was all you ate, breathed, and drank, I've got so much in my head, and I open my mouth and it's like this flood, and she's like, done. Check it out. I've heard it for 20 years.
The good news is you don't have to listen to Lance on 2x speed because he's already there. He's already talking at 2x speed when we're talking about this.
We've had people tell us that on the videos that like, I can't listen to Lance on 2x. I watch all my YouTubes on 2x, but I can't on Lance.
That's funny because I always think it's funny when I hear people like that because I listen to everything on 2x. I started that on my mission. Like when I was on my mission, I had cassette players. There wasn't even CDs or there wasn't really anything digital back then. And I read the scriptures like on 3x. I like went through every single standard work, every institute manual. I just read like so much stuff on my missile, and it was all in 3x, and you could not understand a single word unless you were like reading a line.
What year did you go?
97, 98. Yeah. If you want to know how
time, brother.
Oh, was it awesome? Awesome.
If you want to know how he keeps it straight, you can go to gatheredin.1 and it's all there. There's a lot there. So check out his website. Let's get to another super chat. I know there's been a couple come in.
Here it is.
Okay.
Donating for David, prodigal son Matt. By the way, if you haven't seen Matt's video, it's awesome. Go back. I think it was earlier this week. Really, really cool video. What's your opinion on the global flood and the work of Dr. Andrew Snelling, if you know who that is?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. I have an article on my gathered1.site called How Old is the Earth? How Biblical Timeline Fits with Earth's Geologic and Archaeological Prehistory. Okay, so this is, like, I wrote this years ago and it is totally unfinished, but I'm going to at least show you the timeline that my brother put together, which I think is a plausible model for catastrophism and a young Earth. Okay. So like I said, I could walk you through 1,000 reasons why I haven't been able to make this work, but it still has enough plausibility that I think it would be great if people understood it. But once again, I've never seen a single creationist, not a single creationist out there that doesn't espouse an untenable model. That's why there are no like real good geologists who are creationists, unfortunately, because they always try and take these layers, things that I grew up on, like that I've been on hundreds of times, right? From the Navajo sandstone down to the Tapete sandstone. Like I have seen these layers so much, and these kind of pseudo geologists who come up with their models, they haven't. They travel to them maybe like once a year when they're 40 years old. You know, they haven't lived on them, and so they haven't seen the ecology. They haven't seen all the burrows and the footprints in every single one of those layers, right? Okay, so I have two tenets when it comes to a young Earth. If you're going to believe in a young Earth, one, you have to believe that faunal succession is a artifact of reproductive rates. Okay, so follow me on this because it's very difficult, and I've never heard a single person come up with this.
You might have to define that. You just said funnel succession. I don't even know what that is.
Okay, I will define these things. God, we don't have enough time. We're gonna have to do our own thing on this. But this is the only way. This is the only way that you can make it fit. Okay, so and the second one is that the flood has to be an extinction event, not a huge depositional event. Okay, so let me walk you through those words. Okay, the fossil record shows faunal succession. That is a true artifact of the fossil record, meaning that the lowest layers have more simplistic life, right? When you go to the Cambrian, like there's no life other than the single cell organisms and cyanobacteria, right? And stromatolites before the Cambrian at 500 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion, right? And then life kind of explodes on the scene, which is a great kind of a creationist hit point, because it really does. Like complex life really shows up immediately, but it's still only marine life. And it's still mostly just like you start seeing shells and brachiopods and, you know, bryozoans after that, trilobites early on. And then as you get higher and like the Devonian, you start seeing fish, right? And then you start seeing bigger fish and whales and stuff like that. And then after that, you start finding land animals like alligators, you know, reptiles of certain kinds. Like that is a true, I doubted it myself. Like I say, I have double checked every single one of these things. I did not swallow a single thing that a geologist or my professors told me. I checked this out myself, and I can show it to you. So then if that is true, and there really is faunal succession in the fossil record, we have to be like, well, okay, it kind of looks like evolution. Did evolution happen? Well, there's one explanation that nobody uses, which is another possible way to look at it, right? A multiple viewpoint that I hold space for, even though I don't necessarily believe, right? This is it. If we were to have, it's called the zoo hypothesis, right? If we were to have some extraterrestrials, a god or something like that comes and he takes all life and he puts it in a garden in one little continent or an island on the earth, right? Because it's uninhabited. Well, it would take a lot of time for those animals to reproduce and fill the earth and start dying to show up in the fossil record, right? And so then what animals would you start seeing in the global fossil record first? The ones that reproduce the fastest. Okay, like let that sink in. If you had some kind of a zoo hypothesis where a higher being God put a bunch of animals on a single island, the ones that would show up globally in the fossil record would be the ones that reproduce the fastest. Now, I think it's interesting that is what we see, right?
Matt says that he likes the flood model, and it makes more sense than the answers in Genesis model.
Yeah, the answers in Genesis, all the evangelists, their model does not work. It absolutely does not work. Like I said, they are armchair geologists. They don't know their stuff. I could take them and just prove every one of their points wrong. We could do like a huge 2-hour special where I walk you into the Grand Canyon. We go and we look at these little footprints and these burrows and stuff. And you'd be like, yeah, well, obviously that looks exactly like a modern beach. I can see the little worms burrowing next to a crustacean or something like that. That's not a flood, So, hey, that totally proves wrong their entire idea that like half the Grand Canyon or half the Mesozoic is flood deposits. That is untenable. That is not possible. Okay. I would tell you if it was possible. I'm like incredibly open to this idea. It's just not. And I can show it and I can prove it to you. And I hope that you'll take my word for it. But if you don't, come with me on a geologic field trip. Right.
Okay.
Let's
Big
get
shout
through
out right now to Janelle Murphy. She just dropped $10. Thank you, Janelle. She's one of our Zion Media, tunes in all the time. So thank you, Janelle, for the $10 donation.
We love Janelle.
You guys are awesome. Dave deserves it too, man. He does so much hard work.
Yeah. David, do you have another question for Lance that we can move to?
Yeah, I was just about to say. So our next question is actually from Latter-day Chad again. He asked earlier on if this and is hell Gnostics stole the endowments.
He says if this is hell, then the Gnostics stole the endowment. Do you believe that's true?
I don't know. Gnosticism is such a huge corpus of works. I have over my bookshelf the Gnostic Bible that I've gone through a lot, and I mean I don't even know if it all originates in Egypt. I think there might have been various groups of Gnostics. So I don't really follow that as closely, but when it comes to the temple endowment stuff, I am really interested in the Roman temple stuff, like the Mithraic cults. If you haven't read about, just go to the Wikipedia article and try and read about Mithraic Roman cults and how they pervaded Rome pretty early, right from the 1st century to the 3rd century. You have all these Mithraeums, like these little subterranean temple things where they had endowment sessions, and they were all based along lines of what they believe, what they call Mithraicism, which was kind of like a Persian mystery cult. But like I say, I think that the northern tribes went up into Armenia, right, and really integrated into the Persian Empire when it ruled Armenia, and that those Mithraic cults are actually more Israeli. Like as I go through and I read the Avesta and a lot of those early Zoroastrian texts that they say that the Mithraic stuff is coming out of, I don't think they date to as early as they think they do. Like the earliest evidence you actually have of them is pretty late. Like I swear it's like 900 AD. And they're saying though that it is from 1400 BC. There's no real evidence of that. So anyway, that's a topic that we could go on to in another video because there's some really interesting things. I have a book that talks about how these things were used by Jews to basically take over the Roman Empire, right? Because they're found in the military installations mostly, and they have these temple ceremonies. And this will go to the Kolbrin again. Like I said, there's some cool temple ceremonies in the Kolbrin. There's so much cool stuff to study there. Hit my website, just Google or look at the search bar for it on my website.
Let's keep moving. Quentin Burdett has a question. And Quentin, we just filmed an episode with Quentin. If you don't know Quentin, he is Zelf, the legend of Zelf on Instagram. And so Quentin asked a question. Your thoughts on Nemesi Sipu, Mississippi, meaning river of fish, aka River Sidon. You've won me over on your model, by the way. And he is a Heartlander at his core. So what you're saying is starting to make sense to our boy Quentin. But what are your thoughts on the Mississippi, and give us a response on his question?
Okay, so remember, my river Sidon is, so I think that Mesoamerica, right? Teotihuacan is Zarahemla, right? My entire model is based on the fact that the Book of Mormon is not like this little group of people that happened in a corner, right? Even Cahokia, like possibly the largest, like the biggest ruins that we have in all of North America, really only had about 20,000 people at its peak, right? And it's Mississippian in age, right? So it aged to about 1000 AD. But most of the sites that you see in the Ohio, so whether it be the Adena or the Hopewell, like they don't have sites that really get larger than maybe 10,000 at the most, right? Even Cahokia, like I say, is 20,000 people. That's a pretty small site. And yet we read in the Book of Mormon that these guys are mustering armies, at least in the post-Christian era, of 50,000 people. Like, what kind of population does it take to get an army of 50,000 people? Probably a population of 200,000 people, you know? And so we need to be looking for a city. Like, think of a tiny city in Utah, if you're from Utah, that has like 5,000 people. And think about how many foundations and cellars there are in that town, right? Like Beaver. Beaver is a town that has 5,000 people. Fillmore, less than 5,000 people.
One of my favorite two cities.
Yeah, right. love those areas. So anyway, if you go and you look in a LiDAR, you'd see that there was so much ground disturbance in those cities. Well, that's a tiny little city. We need a city that has 200,000 people to get an army of 50,000 people for the Book of Mormon. Like 200,000 people, that's the size of Provo. Like that's the Salt Lake Valley. They didn't reach 200,000 people for like 25, 30 years before they got, and they were already building the temple and stuff at times like that. We should look for a big city. Now, if you have ever seen Teotihuacan, there is nothing like it. There's nothing like it. It is so mind-blowing. I wish I could hurry and show you the videos. I could if you gave me a second of that I took.
Oh, we'll do a video on this. We got plenty of time, plenty more episodes.
I mean, Teotihuacan is so spectacular, right? And so is Cholula, the Great Pyramid of Cholula, one of the biggest pyramids in the world. The Great Pyramids in Teotihuacan, they're almost as big, like 3/4 the size of the Giza pyramids. These are so incredibly impressive. My whole premise, right, is that the Book of Mormon did not happen in a little quarter. It was not this little group of 10,000 people. Zarahemla was not this tiny little group of like 10,000 people, or even a tiny little group of 20,000 people. It was making armies of 50,000 people. It had 200,000 people.
Totally. And just do the math in Alma chapter 63, verse 4. There's 5,400 men that travel by foot, and it says they take their women and children. Just that group that left is got to be 30,000 people. So I'm with you, Lance. It was a large group of people that were building massive cities.
And compare that to the other models. Like if we're going to believe that Zarahemla was in Ohio or Iowa, you know, where the Doctrine and Covenants was, because for reasons I say that are important reasons, why he says to call that Zarahemla. But there's nothing there. Like I think that Wayne May is trying to kind of stretch and be like, well, I think maybe we found a mound, but nobody even actually agrees it's a mound. That's one mound. You know, and then compare that to the other models, like the Sorensen Grijalva model. His Zarahemla is Santa Rosa, right, which is smaller than Chapa de Corso. Both of those cities have less than 200 mounds, right? They had populations of less than 20,000 people. And so once again, you're trying to put Zarahemla in these tiny little things. In the heartland as well, they're trying to make the city of Nephi, I can't remember its name, but it's under a river in Tennessee. But once again, it's a site that probably had, if they're lucky, 5,000 people, probably 4,000 people. Like you compare that to my models of the Valley of Mexico with Cholula and Teotihuacan and Monte Alban, like these sites that are just like mind-blowing, right? The Valley of Mexico, I mean, Teotihuacan itself had at least 150,000 people, but in the surrounding regions, it probably had, it could have been up to 350,000 people. Once you bring in Cuicuilco, Cholula, Puebla, like there's so many sites.
When you say Cholula, it makes me want Mexican food, Lance.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my River Sidon, right, comes right through Cholula, because Cholula is the original Zarahemla, right? And Teotihuacan is the city that Laconius built, which is why it has like all of these barrios from different cultures, because it was a completely pre-planned city to try and gather the people together. But the Rio Balsas is my River Sidon.
Quentin he says thanks, and he wishes that he can ask a million questions. He says, let's do a video.
We're doing
Heartlander asks Lance.
Done
Lance, all the questions. That's actually a great idea.
All right, here's the latest. Here's the latest and greatest. Lance, Can you explain the two creations from the Kolbrin? Kevin Nelson, shout out Kevin Nelson, $2.79. He got specific. He was like $2.89, $2.79.
Yeah. So the Kolbrin is awesome. The Kolbrin is awesome, and I think it has more than two creation. I think if I remember, it has two kind of lengthy creations, and then maybe even allusions to two other ones, right? And the first one, the book of Hermanatur, which is undoubtedly a version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. All these ancient texts, which are coming from, they're coming from Assyria and from Egypt, right? So they're not. This is interesting. This is the way that I see it, right? I think Hoshkia in the Kolbrin he's Assyrian. We know that he comes from Syria, but I think he is an Israelite, right? I think that there is enough, like I said, the cult that he's part of is the Sons of Light, which is the same group as the Dead Sea Scrolls is saying that the Essenes call themselves the Sons of Light. So I think that the Northern Kingdom was far more entrenched in Egyptian mythology than the Southern Kingdom, right? Because the Bible as we know it, right, wasn't assembled until Ezra. So after the Babylonian captivity, and he kind of assembled the Bible as we know the Old Testament as we know it. So before that, I think that what Nephi would have had, and definitely what the Northern Kingdom had, was a lot more Egyptian texts, because Egypt ruled Israel, both the Southern and the Northern Kingdom, from the time of Jeroboam, right? After Solomon lost the kingdom, his sons basically were conquered by Egypt. And so Egypt ruled both the Northern and Southern kingdoms. They were either vassals or partners for like at least 400 years after that. So I think those creation stories are actually kind of coming from Egyptian mythology and Assyrian mythology. Something really cool about them, though, is I think that you see that there's some there's some glyphs at Chalconzingo, and I actually made a video on this, and I'll post it before too long, that goes through and it correlates really well with one of those creation stories like that. And not only that, a lot of the Mayan stuff, right? You know how the Mayans show multiple creations, how it's like a creation and a recreation. Well, that's really the flavor that we get from those creation stories in the Kolbrin, right? Because it talks about a creation and then a recreation, and that fits into my geology stuff in the timeline where I think that the scriptures are being used, like are creating this brilliant symbolic 7,000 year timeline that's actually kind of fitting into the true timeline in a way that teaches us very important multidimensional metaphors. Okay, if that makes sense.
Totally. And there, listen, go read Genesis chapter 1, go read Genesis chapter 2. Those are two creations. And I know we want to say, oh, one's a spiritual and one's a physical. Well, he says to multiply and replenish in chapter 1 of Genesis. So if it's a spiritual creation, I guess they're creating spiritually. So go read that. Two creations there too. Okay.
Hey, so actually, real quick, we actually have a former guest that just commented in the chat. And he actually has a little bit of a pushback. This is David Reed, the author of Face of a Nephite. Really great book. And he actually, the pushback is he suggests that you're wrong and that there's evidence of much higher populations. For example, the Chillicothe, Ohio area had 12 assembly areas, each over 100 acres, which could each hold over 10,000 people at a time. What are your thoughts on
that? So yeah, bring me the dig notes. You're talking about regional areas versus an individual city. So when I say that none of those cities had more than 10,000 people, they didn't. So if you find me a paper that says an individual city had more than 10,000 people other than Cahokia, right? And maybe Watson Break and some of the bigger things that are either earlier or later than Book of Mormon dates. Anyway, and I'll buy you a Coke. But regionally, right? So
right,
regionally,
you heard it, David.
So regionally in the Ohio Valley, for sure, you're right. And that's probably what you're talking about. Because when you're reading the entire region, like the entire Hopewell region, yeah, I mean, there's tons of, I mean, there was probably 1 million people in there, right? If we go all the way from Pennsylvania down to
you're talking
like Arkansas.
About in like New York City, there's a lot of people in a small area, and that's what you're saying. Zarahemla was a small area, a lot of people.
Right. But once again, if you're trying to somehow make the case that there was more people in the Hopewell civilization and the Hopewell kind of centers of population than the Teotihuacan Empire, no one is going to agree with that. Who's like, just talk to any credible archaeologist in the world.
It'd be great if we could have a side by side on that.
Yeah, and well, I mean, here, like, share my screen and let's just show you Teotihuacan.
Let's go.
Okay, when people reach the thresholds of hundreds of thousands of people, they start making amazing stuff, right? They start making like the cathedrals that you see in Europe.
So here's his response. He says within a 12-mile radius.
So how many is he saying within a 12-mile radius? And population is population is kind of an interesting thing too. You'll see in Mesoamerica, especially in the El Mirador Basin, like the Meso guys will always talk about the populations there because they'll catch on to some article that maybe kind of mentions one person who gives a rough estimate of populations in their paper, and they'll be huge. But then if you get a paper that's actually by someone who specializes in populations, right, and actually does kind of a rigorous study, they'll always downgrade those populations like drastically, right? So like some papers will say Teotihuacan, the city itself, had 250,000 people. And some of them will say Tikal, or El Mirador will have like 250,000 people. But then you get into the actual literature and you look at the study and it's like, no, once again, like think of a 250,000 person city in America and think of the cathedrals that they've got going. Think of how many buildings they have. Think of how huge and how many people that actually is, and then compare it to what you see there, compared to a city that maybe has like 15,000 people but has a really impressive church, which like lots of the Mormon cities, like Paris, Idaho is a great one that comes to mind there. It's like a city of like 400 people, and yet it has this like pretty beautiful church. And that's the equivalent to like the mounds. So like when you start getting hundreds of thousands of people, you get amazing structures. So like I said, look, do you see the people in here? This is the Temple of the Moon. This isn't even the Temple of the Sun. This is a smaller pyramid. These pyramids in Teotihuacan, they blow everything else out of the water, right? It's like a mile. You just have to go there because Tikal, it's pretty dang impressive. It doesn't work for Zarahemla because it's on the wrong side of the river. And it post-dates the Book of Mormon, but it's the biggest city in the Meso world. And it doesn't even hold a candle to Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan dominated it. Teotihuacan dominated the continent. It was so big. Anyway, I sympathize once again with you when different groups try and kind of make individual sites or cities. And let's see, let's just go. Maybe he'll have to tell me even which one he's talking about, and we can actually go in there and look it up.
What we should do is we'll do another episode and we'll bring on some of these Heartland guys like David Reed, like
a round table.
And we'll have a nice discussion. I want to get to Sam Sampson, who gave us a $5 super chat. He asked an interesting question. He says, "Hey Lance, could you go into the lacuna and how Moroni could have been around 1200 AD and rather than 400 AD? Would love to see a video on this too."
All right. So
I don't even know what that means.
It doesn't, because he's been reading my stuff. I haven't even shared that on Zion Media. And it's super complicated. I'm going to just try and simplify it really quick. Okay. I have two timelines, right? So my primary timeline just kind of hugs with the Book of Mormon and the dominant model. And that would be that Teotihuacan is, basically the land of Zarahemla, Cholula, right? And that I've actually found some archaeologically attested dates to where there was a huge civil war essentially within Teotihuacan right there at about 320 AD, like archaeologically dated. They actually find that the palace was burnt and that the Quetzalcoatl cult was destroyed, which is pretty amazing, right? Right there when the Book of Mormon says it does. And then you have a couple evidences of destruction leading up to the Hopewell, and then the Hopewell are destroyed about the same time, right? And so that's kind of like a bullseye on the Book of Mormon. It's like, that's pretty good. We have like a trail of cultural destruction that's okay, that leads us from Mesoamerica to Camorra, right? But when I really started studying this, what I found out is that there is a second wave of destruction that happens around 1100 AD. And it is so much more, widespread. Like it just started to blow my mind as I read about every single city, and hopefully you can kind of see my cursor here, but every culture from the Valley of Mexico up West Mexico, we find huge battles where there's massive burial mounds, right? El Ombligo, we find the Southwest culture exploding right at that same time of 1000 AD. It's like people are coming up from somewhere and urbanizing the entire population. They're starting to use cannibalism to kind of like urbanize people and to terrorize people. So there's tons of examples of cannibalism. There's tons of examples of all of these, like after it gets built up, it just completely collapses and everything's burnt down and everyone runs up in the hills and hides up in these dwellings. And then right after that, you get Cahokia collapsing, and you get this massive sacrifices that are happening not only in Cahokia, but all the way up in these sites up in Minnesota. And then the Trail of Destruction goes all the way up through the Ohio Valley to Cumorah. And there's a ton of burial mounds all around Cumorah that all date to that early Mississippian collapse, right?
I got to interrupt you. My ADD is screaming at me here. Those dots, did you make every one of those dots?
I did, man. I did.
Dude, come on. Zoom in. Talk about, go to one where they're dense.
Let's see, the densest area of sites.
Bro. Are you kidding me? So click on one of those just so that we can appreciate what's happening here.
Yeah, let's take you to, since I'm talking about Cholula and my River's Iden here.
So for anybody who wants to tango with Lance here, realize the amount of work that has gone into these things. Okay. Bro.
And then you can switch, like this is really handy because if you want to see, like, emphasize the rivers, you can go to all sorts of different maps, right? And then you can actually zoom in and see the actual. Anyway, this is a resource, and this is really what I think allowed me. I had general ideas from all the kind of dreams and inspiration I had before, but it was this that I think really allowed me to key in on individual cities and kind of solve almost every single city in the Book of Mormon. And so, once I created an internal model.
I'd be interested to see what you have on Utah. That's a lot of density up around there too.
So it's the Southwest, and like I said, these Anasazi cultures are the ones that they explode at about 800 to 900 AD. The population explodes and urbanizes. They build Chaco. If you haven't seen Chaco, and Chaco is so spectacular, just the biggest ruins in the West.
Could that be a case for the Nemenhah record and those people?
Absolutely. So that's why I have a double timeline. That's why I started looking for reasons why it's like, well, these things radiocarbon date to 1000 AD, but the Book of Mormon, both to 1100 AD, but the Book of Mormon says that the destruction happened at 350 to 400 AD. So then the question is, well, could the radiocarbon dating be wrong? Was there some kind of a reservoir effect, right? And I understand radiocarbon dating really, really, really well. And so it's such a complicated thing to try and come up with reasons why there could be some kind of a corruption of the radiocarbon dates in an entire region, but not in the old world. But then a second idea is, well, maybe the Book of Mormon itself has a lacuna, because we see that a lot in the ancient records in the Egyptian chronologies, especially, where you have like a missing time period. And as I started looking at 4th Nephi, and it's like, well, 4th Nephi doesn't even work. There's not enough people in there. These guys would have had to have their kids. Amram would have had to have his kid when he was like 95 years old or something like that, because there's only 4 people to bridge the 400 years. Anyway, I have an article on that. People can go to it and explore that lacuna idea. And also how I saw it in Ixtlilxochitl, because he has 2 different timelines as well, one of them at 350 AD and one of them at 1000 AD, and the different authors between Ixtlilxochitl and some of the other Spanish chronologers, they like differ in their opinion. And then I found that there was this massive 776 radiocarbon event where we find something huge happen. I think it was either a comet that struck or a massive coronal mass ejection that screwed with the radiocarbon dates right at 776. And so that's what made me think like, oh, God. And
776 AD?
776 AD. And not only that, and that's right when Ixtlilxochitl says that there was a second Quetzalcoatl, right? He talks about Quetzalcoatl existing right about the time of Christ, and then another Quetzalcoatl that comes at 776. And like one's the king and one's the savior, Quetzalcoatl. But the second one comes right near this destruction. And I'm like, well, what if because there was 2 destructions and 2 Quetzalcoatls, he kind of like misses this 700-year period and starts the second Quetzalcoatl as being 0. And isn't it crazy that almost to the year, this string of destructions that I find that matches the Book of Mormon string of destructions happens like exactly 350 to 370 years after the second Quetzalcoatl and the second destruction event. So that's my second timeline. And you don't have to believe in that one if you don't want to, because it requires you to say, well, someone in the Book of Mormon kind of made a mistake. Or maybe the radiocarbon dates are wrong, but it's something that when I make a video, everyone should check out, because I've correlated like things down to the Tower of Sherazah. Like the Tower of Sherazah is there. Like the Salomon ruins matches it perfectly. Got women and children that are being burned alive exactly like it says, right next to people who are being cannibalized exactly like it says, with the civilization all destroying and anybody who couldn't flee before the army just gets like killed and burnt out. Anyway, it's spectacular stuff. Like every city.
So Latter-day Chad has another super chat, and he's basically dogging on the educators, and he's basically saying, hey, if we believe in these archaeologists, aren't they the ones who also say there was no metallurgy or horses in America? So how credible are these archaeologists at the end of the day? And then you can see here, the point in making is that many scholars oftentimes base their models on aesthetic viewpoints of preconceived notions, like how Native Americans were not civilized, just to justify manifest destiny. Thoughts on that?
I mean, he's a kid after my own heart. I'll tell you my story that when I went to BYU, right after my mission, I went into the physics department and started like an argument with the main geophysicist, astrophysicist, trying to tell him how like Velikovsky's stuff seemed like it was possible to me. And he started kicking back with scripture and trying to tell me, no, the scriptures say that there couldn't be catastrophes. And I like wiped the floor with him. I went through so many scriptures and just like kind of destroyed him in this fight. And it got so heated that finally he kicked me out of his office. Like he was pissed. And he's like, I have never done this before, but I want you to get out of my office.
Yes.
and this is me, like just this like 20-year-old kid, you know, punk, like prideful. I don't know. When I got out, I was shaking. I was like, what the heck, man? I did not try to get in a Bible bash there, but I get it. I get it.
Who was this with?
It was with like an astrophysicist, the main physics professor in the Department of Physics at BYU. But I just want, now that I'm older and that I'm like rubbing shoulders and all my colleagues are these professors, you know what? Academia is just people. It's just people. And they're in such a better place than they were because we all have the internet. We can all exchange ideas so much easier. There are reasons why a lot of them are wrong. A lot of them have an agenda. You got to take things that everyone, you know, take what I say with a grain of salt. Try and prove it yourself. Find people that you really think are smart and that don't just focus in, aren't myopic, which is how most scholars are. They have their specialty and they don't know a lot outside of that. Find people who have a more broad knowledge and exchange ideas with them. Like,
is there anything to nuclear tests affecting carbon dating?
Yes, absolutely. So the nuclear carbon spike is well known. As soon as they started atmospheric nuclear testing, then the radiocarbon levels in the atmosphere went tenfold. Right. And so let's just do right here. We'll just do a Google search. And if you look up carbon spike from nuclear testing, and then go to the images, and you'll see a ton of graphs that show the measured levels of radiocarbon. Okay. And so you can see, right, like in the 1950s, when they started these atmospheric tests, the radiocarbon levels just like flew through the roof. And now they're almost back to pre-testing levels. Right, which tells us a lot, right? So the same thing can happen from a coronal mass ejection, which is what's going on with the 776 event. We see the same spike in 776. You can look in Wikipedia for that. Because if you have a massive CME that comes from the sun, because radiocarbon is created in the upper atmosphere from nitrogen atoms, right? Anytime you have some kind of an influx, it could even be maybe like neutrinos or something from a pulsar or something.
Yeah, what about this right here? This is kind of in the same lines.
Yeah. So like I said, I believe that there is a major problem in radiocarbon, and it's kind of known, called the Hallstatt plateau. So if you look up the late Iron Age Hallstatt plateau, radiocarbon plateau, that's somewhere where they know that there's a problem with radiocarbon dating. But the big thing is that if there is something that causes a problem with radiocarbon dating, it's going to happen the same. Because the radiocarbon distributes pretty rapidly, and so it's going to cause the same problem throughout the Earth. Right? Both in the old world and the new world. And so if you want to say, let's say that at 1000 AD, that there's a problem with radiocarbon dating, right? Well, then we'd have to be able to go to Israel or to France or England, where they're digging up some kind of a Viking ship, and they kind of had historical records and pottery and textiles that say, yeah, this looks like it's 1000 AD. And then they'd have to say, oh, but why is it radiocarbon dating to 300 years different? You know what? You'd see it. So if you were going to propose a problem in radiocarbon dating, it has to be consistent worldwide, unless there's some kind of a sink. And I go through that in my things. And that's the exact same problem that everyone is running against when they're trying to say different shorelines. Like everybody in the comments in the Heartlands, like, there were different shorelines before the time of Christ. I get it. I sympathize with you. But if you think that there was different shorelines, right, then you have to be able to go to my map right here, and you have to be able to find a place that has that has no sites in the area that you say the shoreline was, right? So if you think the shoreline came all the way up the Mississippi, right, in just before the time of Christ, well, now how do you explain all of these pre-classic sites that radiocarbon date to before the time of Christ, right? And that we can go and take.
How are there civilizations there if that was a ocean before?
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, like we can go to, so we can go to earlier ones, like here. And I mean, there's tons of sites. In fact, there are sites. I'll show you. There's one site that is up in there. Sorry, I'll find all my.
By the way, while you're pulling this up, we got shots fired right here, Lance. This is Bruce. I've seen you and Bruce going back and forth on some comments. Yeah. All the evidence is for ancient America, Lance. Stop deceiving the people.
All right, Bruce.
Bruce, we love your comments.
Come on my podcast and let's hammer this out, buddy. Anyway, I love going back and forth with guys. I think I'd have a lot of fun with Bruce. I think we can talk respectfully to each other. And
if I'm not mistaken, Shane, Bruce is the guy who caught us driving northbound on I-15.
Yeah, we know Bruce.
Were driving southbound, and he was like, "You guys are lying."
Bruce, we love you. But I want to wrap up here in about 5 minutes. We're trying to keep this to around an hour. But I saw a comment. Somebody's like, I'd be 1,000,000% Zion Media, but they're a little TBM for me. TBM stands for True Blue Mormon. First off, happy to be a true blue Mormon. But I need to let you guys in on a little secret. All's not well in Zion. A true blue Mormon would believe that all is well in Zion. And I believe that all of us on this podcast, all four of us, do not believe that all is well in Zion. In fact, if you go to Lance's site, he lists out basically a manifesto that says to the church, we think you should repent for a series of things. And I read the manifesto and I agree. I agree that blacks in the priesthood was a problem and a mistake. I believe that polygamy is a problem, was a mistake. And Lance goes through those things. And so, yes, are we true blue Mormons? Absolutely. Do we believe the Book of Mormon to be the word of God? You bet your bottom dollar. But I would say that we are not in the camp that all is well in Zion, that there are some challenges and some issues that need to be corrected. And part of our mission and goal here at Zion Media is to come together. Listen, there's problems in America, but I ain't moving to Canada. I'm staying in America. And the same is true in the church. If there are problems in the church, you don't just bounce. You work from within to correct things. And that's what a true blue Mormon, in my mind, should do. So I just want to get that on the record. Okay.
And it's ironic, Shane, that on these different Facebook forums, people will like post one of our videos and people are like, those Zion Media guys, they're heretics. You know, so like, what are we? Are we true blue Mormons? Are we heretical?
You can't please everyone.
We're getting it on both sides. Hey, I just want to acknowledge that one channel.
That one channel. Let's go.
Dude,
Thanks, guys.
Everybody's got to go figure out what that one channel is. There's some mystery there. And then
that's great.
Latter-day Chad threw in another dude. Latter-day Chad, when we go out to Wisconsin, David's going to have to be buying you lunch or something because you just keep donating, son.
Dude, we need to have a discussion with Latter-day Chad. I want to talk to him for like an hour and a half about all of these things, all these ideas.
We'll do
and
it.
The geology stuff.
Here's a good question. Was the Book of Mormon and the Nemenhah both channeled?
I mean, channel just means like revelation, essentially. So yes, but I draw a real distinction between different channeled works. So, and the Book of Oaspi really talks about this, how there's like these different classes, right? You got like the celestial, terrestrial, celestial. You can channel from any one of those groups. People in the celestial kingdom don't know much more than us. People in the terrestrial kingdom know a lot, but not a whole lot. Only the celestial resurrected spirits like have a view of all things. Right. So if you're channeling from a lower level, from spirits who are actually you have to pass through different levels often when you're doing, when people channel, according to Aspie anyway, like if you're channeling through one of those lower levels, like take it with a grain of salt. I think the Nemenhah records is not like from a resurrected being. I don't think it's the full truth. I don't put it on the same level as the Book of Mormon.
I know we shouted this out, but that one channel, $50 super chat. Love that one channel, whoever that one channel is. Thank you. It goes to the Douglas family. They appreciate it.
What did Bruce catch us with here?
Yeah, he caught us driving.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yes. So, okay. Any final thoughts as we wrap this up and close this out?
Yeah, go to Gathered in One, check out the different things. You can read about my insights.
Hey, look, Dad. Look, Dad.
What's the deal with this Shane Baldwin
guy? There's my son. What's the deal with this Shane Baldwin guy? That's a good question. That is a good question.
I'll tell you what the deal is.
He's awesome. He wants dinner. That's what he wants.
Hey, Shane, I do have one question that would be good to hit. Lance, hit on the 2 Cumorah theories, because that was probably the most brought up question again and again. People are having a hard time with the 2 Cumorahs.
Let me emphasize that I believe in 1 Cumorah. I believe in 1 Cumorah. Okay, the continental model is a 1 Cumorah theory. It synthesizes the best from both worlds. And as I talked to Rod Meldrum and Jonathan, right, they're not really married to tying together individual sites. Their big thing is believe Joseph. Joseph was right. Believe the early apostles. Believe there's only 1 Cumorah. Like, that is their number one thing that they feel in their heart, that I do too. And I just want to make it clear, because a lot of people get on there and think that it's like, because I'm advocating a continental model and because I'm saying, hey, the main stuff happened in Mesoamerica, that I'm thinking in 2 Cumorahs. No. Every single thing that Rod and Jonathan have found, like in Wayne May, I believe is part of the Book of Mormon, because that is the land of many waters, is the land of Mulek. It's where the Mulekites came before they went up into the South Wilderness, right? It's like so many things happen there. And I think we are yet to find out that there actually is a ton more stuff that is not in the Book of Mormon that happened up there, both between groups that came from England, right, and then onto America, and groups that came from North Africa. I have tons of really awesome stuff. Like everything that the Heartlanders believe, that they hold dear, at least, I am right there with you. And I have great explanations for why Joseph Smith called Zarahemla and Manti, because those are their secondary Toltec cities. I can't get into it right now. It's really cool stuff, though, that falls onto their Native American mythology.
Okay. Well, some questions and also some promo for Zion Media. For those of you who get to our site here, we've got a little Linktree site here, and a lot of people are asking, how can I contact you guys? Where do I find the Cumorah records? If you come right over here and you click on this Linktree, it clicks over to watch our latest video, and guess what? Shocker, it's not our latest video, David. But then you can come in here and you can access Cumorah. Inside of Cumorah, what we try to do is keep this updated. Lance has his own folder in here because he's special. And look at this stuff. Like, oh my gosh, they're just like
welcome to the 1 Cumorah on Zion Media.
Okay. We've got apocryphal writings. There's a whole bunch of different apocryphal writings in here. We also have the Nemenha/Mentana, and just recently we updated the full one that was online because people were asking about that. And then also contact us.
Latest video, just so you know now. I've updated it.
You can come in here and contact us and send us a message if you have, if you've got some information for the show. If you want to be a guest on Zion Media, if you have somebody that you'd like to be a guest on Media, if you have an idea of a show, send us a message.
Yeah. And big thanks to everybody. I mean, to build a channel out like this in 100 days and be generating the revenue that we're generating, it is because of you that tune in every week, or every day, not every week. We drop a new episode every day at 6:00. It's been so much fun. I've learned a ton. I've met some of the most incredible people over the last 100 days and learned some of the most incredible things because of this channel at Zion Media. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for the super chats. Thank you, Lance, for coming on and dropping knowledge. We need to do, and will do, several more episodes with Lance. And we'll go ahead and wrap this up. For myself, I'm Shane Baldwin. For Trevor the Keys and David the Lion Douglas and our amazing guest Lance Weaver, we'll see you guys all next time. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode. It's going to be one of the best episodes you've ever seen. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Tune into Zion Media. Share that episode. We have a goal to get something on there to 1 billion views, and we're going to need all of your help. So stay tuned tomorrow, 6 p.m.
Bye, guys.